The title of my talk is Shoeless Joe, The Field of Dreams and the Second Noble Truth. And once again, my name is Joy Burns. Today is the 13th of March, 2021, 1 year into the global pandemic. But fortunately, I was able to write an aspirational talk and stick to it pretty much today. Not that there aren't things happening in the world, because there certainly are. So the second noble truth, and this is from Access to Insight. And this, monks, is the noble truth of the origination of dukkha, the craving that makes for further becoming, accompanied by passion and delight, relishing now here and now there, craving for sensual pleasure, craving for becoming, craving for non-becoming. And the three roots of evil that are centered in this second noble truth: greed and desire, ignorance and delusion, hatred and destructive urges. So what could this possibly have to do with Shoeless Joe and the Field of Dreams? So the Shoeless Joe was a famous baseball player at the turn of the 20th century. I hope I get this right, he played for the White Sox. There was a whole big scandal. They got into trouble because they were accused of cheating during the World Series, something like that, pretty close. And he got banned from baseball. But he was this remarkable player. And one of my favorite writers, W.P. Kinsella, wrote a novel entitled Shoeless Joe that was made into a movie that's called The Field of Dreams. And it's one of those romantic movies that has a bit of fantasy in it. And the fantasy is that this farmer in the middle of Iowa has the White Sox walk out of his cornfield, and in the evening they would play a game in this small ball field that he built, taking out part of his cornfield, which, to the distress of his brother-in-law, was eating into his profits, and he was about to go into bankruptcy. So in the summer of 1991, I made my pilgrimage to the Field of Dreams, to the Iowa Writers Workshop at Iowa City at the University of Iowa, so that I would fulfill a personal fantasy of writing for a week. I had wanted to write since I was 9 years old, and when I told my parents that I wanted to be a writer, they said, "Writers don't make any money. You will not be a writer." And so they really squashed my dream and my fantasy. And so this was kind of my week to write in this idyllic writer's Mecca, haven, heavenly place. It was in the 1990s, and probably still is, one of the top writing programs in the country. And no less than W.P. Kinsella was going to be there that week, and there was going to be a trip out to the Field of Dreams. So I had to go. And I had this fantasy. It was going to be wonderful, beautiful, wonderful weather, great environment. I was just going to write like crazy for a whole week and love it, love it, love it, eat it up. And when I landed, it was over 100 degrees. and wickedly hot and muggy. No, actually dry, actually a bit dry heat. Um, and very sunny because they don't have trees the way we do in the Northeast. So it was blisteringly hot. Um, the program itself that I was in was wonderful. There were people from all over the country who had converged in Iowa City for that week of writing. Um, and W.P. Kinsella himself was incredibly charming. So we go out to the Field of Dreams. We go to and we get to play a little bit of softball on the field, and I walk into the field of the cornfield, and I think I'm going to have this transcendent experience, and I'm going to emerge from the cornfield a writer. And so I go into the cornfield with this romantic fantasy, like the movie, something is going to happen that's going to be transformative for me. And it's full of bugs. The cornfield is full of bugs, and they get in my ears and they're in my hair. And I went running out of the cornfield because it was really intolerable being in the midst of all those bugs. So, greed, desire, ignorance, delusion, hatred of bugs. I had no destructive urges to kill any bugs, but I think I covered the roots of evil very well. Um, and I did do some writing. I was in a memoir writing class, and I wrote about my childhood, and specifically about time I spent with my grandmother in her kitchen. Um, and I still am not a writer because the belief that I had that my parents created is so powerful in my life that it's even today, it's hard for me to write. And the 2 pages that I wrote my talk on were largely blank until 10:15 today, which was unusual for me. Usually my talks are written the night before, and I write, or days before, and I write the whole thing down, and it's usually 2 or 3 pages. So blank pages for a talk was pretty unusual for me. But that goes to that suffering, right? That incredible suffering of my clinging to that story and that belief that my parents implanted in me. Writers are poor. You will not be a writer. They've been dead over 30 years. You think I would have gotten over it by now. Lots of suffering. And that's the nature of the Four Noble Truths, is to help us to recognize these stories, the clinging, the embeddedness of some belief that we might have about ourselves. In the chat, I wrote down ehipasiko, and that is something that the Buddha said. Come and see for yourself. So the Buddha, in a sense, threw down a challenge to us about challenging our beliefs and our stories, whatever they might be. For me, it's about this ability that I have to write. Sometimes it's also about my place in the world as a Black woman. You know, do I belong here? How do I fit in this place in which whiteness is so centered? And when the Buddha said Hipasiko, he put his finger on the ground and said, "The earth is my witness that I belong here, my witness to the truth that suffering exists and that there is a way for suffering to cease." The eight, um, the Eight Noble Path, you know, what we spent last year talking about, the Eightfold Path. And so I'm going to read from the Buddha's fire sermon, which is related to the second noble truth. About the origination of suffering. Because all is suffering, and what is the all that is burning? The I is burning, forms are burning, I consciousness is burning, I contact is burning. Also, whatever is felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, that arises with eye contact for its indispensable condition, that too is burning. Burning with what? Burning with the fire of lust, with the fire of hate, with the fire of delusion. I say it is burning with birth, aging, and death, with sorrows, with lamentations, with pains, with griefs, and with despairs. The Buddha went on to say the same of the other four senses and the mind, showing that attachment to positive, to negative, and neutral sensations and thoughts is the cause of suffering.